we're here to talk about rediscovering the original breath, which is looking for what is it like to breathe if I just didn't know how to breathe, if I had never done it before, and if I was relearning in this moment. There's this super cool concept of the beginner's mind, where beginners really carry with them something like a creativity and optimism. They're like, I've never done this before. That's kind of interesting. Whereas people who get a bit more mature are like, this again, I've done this before. And then really good experts get back to that beginner's mind, and they can see it fresh again, which obviously leads them to really powerful new discoveries, even though they might know what they're doing. Now, breathing is something we do all the time. We're bored of it. We're sick of it. Maybe we're not sick of it, but what we want to do is like start again. So let's try this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to breathe out, and then we're going to try our best not to like breathe again, and also not to not breathe again, right? To just like let all the breath out and then just kind of wait and see what happens. And it may not work the first round. We might have to do second, third, sort of like doing that. But if you just breathe out and wait. And immediately I'm like, oh, I'm like squeezing my lungs, like not really letting the next breath happen. So I'm going to have to like do a second one and be like,
yeah, can't do it for very long.
right, well, something's got to happen next, right? We got to properly breathe, or we'll start feeling like we're choking or like dying or something. So there's got to be some breathing that happens. But obviously it's, if we're too in control of it, it's not going to feel it. You want to try again?
Yeah, there it is.
Right. So,
It's interesting to see what exactly is uncomfortable about it. Like, where does it feel uncomfortable?
right. But there's also this very lightweight breath that's ready to happen. It's just like a feather, very, very gentle. And that's like, oh, I like that one. That's it doesn't take difficulty. It doesn't take not breathing. It doesn't take breathing. It's just kind of very lightweight. And that's like, as it happens, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's new. Well, that's, somehow it's like a flow that I'd love to get into more. So like some people
Is what you're saying that when you stop breathing, the next breath is like that? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, they're like, when I stop trying to breathe or not breathe, the next breath can move in very lightly.
Yeah.
Some people use the phrase like the body breathes itself. And I just get to watch it happen. You want to
do you feel that way? Like, what I find interesting about it is it feels as though I could say, you know what, I'm just going to not breathe ever again, and then I may die, but that's just what's going to happen. And it then doesn't feel like, oh, the body kicks in and breathes itself. It feels like, oh, I've changed my mind. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm doing it now.
Right. Okay. So there's a slightly different version of this that might be a bit easier, where if we're watching the breath, usually like we watch it on the breath. So like as the breath goes up, we're watching it go up, and as the breath goes down, we're watching it go down. But what we can do is, instead of watching on the breath, we can watch behind the breath. So we're sort of like following it. So as it goes up, we are like following it go up, and as it goes down, we follow it down. And the interesting thing about that is that like it's less like a controlling action and more like I'm just gonna see what happens. I'm gonna like follow behind it. Maybe try that one. See.
Yeah, it becomes much more shallow, maybe.
Mhm.
It's like tiny little sips of air. If you're not like, I am going to breathe, you know.
Mm, right. So this is particularly in contrast to like leading the breath, like knowing where the breath is about to be. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
I'm gonna breathe in big, and then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna breathe out. I'm leading the breath. I tell it where to go. So we're trying to like get behind it and see where it wants to go. And like you said, when it doesn't currently have direction, it goes very short. It's like, was that do I want to in breath? Do I want to out breath? Do I want to do like that? Just a very much back and forth little thing.
And it makes me feel like well, my breath at least is like pretty even going in and out when I'm doing it. When
Mm.
I'm doing this, it's not. Like the one of them is longer. I'll wait for a second to see which one it is, but one of them is longer.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, the in breath feels more maybe it's actually not longer, but it feels more quick.
Hmm.
It feels, I guess it's just partially, and this is just me guessing now, the relief of, oh, I need some air. So it's a quick, and then, you know, as opposed to the more, the larger up and down movement of when I'm breathing normally.
Hmm. Right. So like let's try a different exercise, slightly different version. So what we want to do for this one is instead of like leading the breath or following the breath, we just want to be sort of ahead and looking back at the breath. Like it's more like, oh, I knew that I was gonna breathe like this all along. Like so to like sit in the like the knowing place and then go, yes, this is what the breath does. Like I already know what the breath does. See how that one is. Like smug knowing.
It's it's easier.
Hmm.
It's somewhere between the like the normal breath and the short breath thing I was talking about, but it's also kind of difficult to know if it's because the technique is different or because this is the third time I'm trying something.
We're settling in,
Yeah.
we're getting more comfortable. Yeah. Hmm. So I was thinking maybe that would be interesting because uh if I know, like I know the breath, like I know what's gonna happen next, then I can relax a bit about what is gonna happen and like is it gonna breathe for me? I'm like, oh, I know it's gonna breathe.
Mm.
I just don't quite know how. So just gotta learn, gotta find this time how it does it. But I already know that I'm gonna keep breathing because bodies just keep breathing.
Yeah, now I feel like I'm getting it more. It's like you're watching, being like, I know you're gonna breathe. Like, you know, like when you're holding your breath or you're trying not to breathe, there's a slight pretense as if you might not. And
Mm.
then when you take the stance of, oh well, I know what the breath does, it just happens. And it's a lot more, I guess, yeah, I guess I would say it's a bit more impersonal.
Mm. Yeah. So I wonder if we can do like I don't know what the breath is gonna do to like
Mm.
right. So now that we know what the breath is gonna do, what if we don't know? We just don't know what the breath is gonna do. Let's find out.
Yeah, it feels like the breath is slightly ahead of me. Uh, like there is a bit of a, it's hard to know where this comes from, but it's almost like there's an introduction of an element of fear.
Mm,
Like what is going to happen? Do you know what I mean? And
right.
it affects the breath of it being kind of more, a little bit more ragged.
Right. So immediately I was like, the first thing I noticed was like my heartbeat increased like a little bit. Boom, 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 boom. I'm like, oh, I'm paying attention. Like boom, 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 on the breath. Like I don't know what's gonna happen. With a little bit of fear mystery there, which is like kind of nice as well. If I'm like, how do I engineer my life so that I enjoy it? Well, I want a bit of that. I don't want too much of it because that's like very stressful, but just a little bit of novelty, excitement. And then I want I happen to want a whole bunch of like, I know what I'm doing sort of thing. Because I like to be in control, you know. But then I also want a little bit of like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen.
It does happen automatically, that sense of, oh, if you suddenly take a breath that you weren't planning to take, like,
Mm,
oh, this is a bit bigger than I thought it was going to be. And now, even if you're not, well, actually, this is usually a meditation, but if you weren't expecting it, suddenly you're like, oh, now I'm more on it because what was that? What's going on right now? And it demonstrates to you that you had an expectation that is being like thwarted or something.
mm. Yeah, it's like there's a surprise factor. Or
Mm,
very interested in top down and bottom up prediction model of the mind. Uh,
mm,
I don't know if you're familiar with this. Are you? Okay, so at the bottom, we're like a stack that goes bottom to top. At the bottom, we have sensation. Built on that, we have like working models of the body all the way up to like the cognition that's like complex mind and
mm,
like thought patterns. But usually we have like a top-down predictor and a bottom-up predictor, and then there's some error because we're wrong a bunch of the time. And then we do all of this stuff to try and like reduce the error. And then meditation seems to be taking the top down process and like pulling it away. So mental noting is probably going top down or like putting the top on the bottom of the
mm.
stack, um, and sensation up and then rebuilding from the bottom up, which gives us sort of an interesting experience.
Yeah, when you said top down, bottom up, top down came into my head like, oh yeah, sure, I get what that probably is. I had a bit of a struggle thinking what could bottom up mean,
Mm.
but like so this topic is particularly interesting to me because when I started meditating, I think I went a whole year without being knowing what the breath even was. I was very much like, oh, this is just a concept of an in breath, the concept of an out breath. And I would say to
Wow.
people, what is it? What is the breath? Explain it to me. How do I find it? And they say, well, how do you know you're breathing? And I'm like, whoa, how do I know? I feel like I just know. But then one day, it was a particular like moment, but it was a quiet kind of moment where I was like, oh, that was there the whole time.
Mm.
So that moment of that was there the whole time seems to me like a bottom up thing that
Yeah.
was being obscured by a top down kind of, we have all the information we don't need to collect any more data, thanks very much.
Mm. Right. So if we really look at the breath, every because of randomness in reality in the universe, every moment is going to feel slightly different.
Hmm.
Now, our top-down processes says, "I know how to breathe. I've done this before." But if we try and go bottom up, then there's room for new possibility. There's room for uh, opportunity, novelty, curiosity. Like there's some need for lots of that in order to live a good life anyway.
Hmm.
So, and then like if I say like, how to describe the breath, what's going on? You want to try that?
So for me, I think temperature is often the main thing.
Mm.
The sense of pressure as well. Usually, I think those two are the main things. It's generally it's supposed to be, or thought to be, that the in breath is easier to feel than the out breath. Sometimes that's true. I find sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes I can't feel my out breath at all. Sometimes it's totally predominant. Sometimes I can feel it on my lips. Sometimes I can feel it uh, right at the nose. But the marker for what it is and where it is usually temperature and pressure.
Hmm.
Um,
Right. So it feels hot, it feels cold, it feels heavy, it feels
yeah,
right.
I do find it a little bit difficult, like when you're doing TMI following, for example. I often am like, oh, there's the end of it. But I'm like, is it? Like, isn't that still going for like a slight second after my mind tells me that it's stopped? It's like, or maybe it's the other way around, but one way or the other, it seems like my mind says, there's the end. And either when I look at the sensations, I'm either like, no, it ended a second ago, or oh no, it's still going for, like 0.1 of an extra second.
Hmm. Wow. Cool. Yeah, I would like, so if I try and describe the breath as I noticed it in this moment, like the first bit I notice is like tension as I like take a bit of a breath in, like my nostrils squeeze a bit around and I feel like my nostrils like go in a bit. And then as I keep breathing, like I notice my diaphragm is pulling down a bit. And there's like, I feel the air moving through my throat. And I feel my whole chest moving out. Like there's the sensation keeps changing. There's like this one, then that one, then that one, then that one, then that one. And it does that all the time. I feel as I breathe out there, I feel the breath on my lips a little bit.
Mm. And do you find, so like the back of the throat thing, I can direct my attention there, but the way you were describing it, it felt like your attention was being pulled back there, or then pulled to the diaphragm, pulled back up. What I feel is very much like either I'm directing attention to a specific place, and then that's almost all what I'm feeling, except for a very gross sensation. Like if I'm directing attention here, I'm still aware that my stomach is moving.
Mm.
But if I am just saying the breath, it's like your whole upper body kind of just slightly going up and back down, especially like shoulders going up and down.
Right. So if I look for what in my entire experience happens when I breathe in,
Mhm.
my entire mind goes like this and back.
Yeah, yeah, right.
It's not just my body moves up, but my awareness, like it's quite unstable that like every like my visual field moves and like there's like how do I even describe that? Like there's an uplift in it. My entire cognitive space goes woo, just a little bit
Mm.
of like woo. Um, and that one I didn't notice until later. Like first it was like chest moving, and then it was like a little bit of an emotional, but really like everything moves every breath if I really try and notice. And then obviously if I do like stabilize my mind, try and be still and just watch what the breath is doing, then I can do that as well.
Mm. The thing about your mind getting slightly excited on the in breath, I watched the video you had on like the light jhanas, and I was like, I like tried it for a while. I was like, okay, that sounds easy. Breathe in and you get slightly excited. I just couldn't tune into it at all. I was like, this is just the breath. You know what I mean? It didn't seem to be exciting my mind. But as you say, that came later for you.
Right.
Or do you mean later in a single breath cycle?
Later in practice, but I'm happy
Yeah,
to try it now, I feel like.
sure. If you think that's
Yeah, sure. So the thing I describe as like first jhana like is the like start of the in-breath.
hmm.
The like sharp uplift at the start of the in-breath. So if you want to try that, try it.
And it's not a special breath, it's just
It's on every breath. try just take a quick breath in. Faster.
Yeah, I guess that does feel, yeah, okay. Now I see what you're saying. It's like there's something, yeah, this is what you said in the video. It's like there's something happening that's exciting. And you're almost like, ooh, what is it?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right. So then,
It's just you're trick. I guess you're just like tricking your mind, or you're making your body do the thing that it does when it's excited. So that, like, this would be like a top down, bottom up thing, maybe, where instead of something out there doing something to me here, I'm doing it. But then it's like, well, hang on, there must be something doing it. What is it? Yeah.
right.
Is
So
that?
it habitually looks outside for what that thing is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But so we've done this now with concrete object, the breath, right? I can uplift the breath like that, and like all of my sensory experience gets a little excited. Later, I can just do the uplift without the breath as well, and use more like an intention to do that upwards moving, like positive. Um, and that's a more subtle object, and it gets more stable, because the thing about the breath is that it sort of goes in and out and it changes and it does a lot of that. But if you use just your mental version of like up moving thingy-majiggy, which you can learn basically off the breath, then you can get into like a deeper jhana, because your object doesn't change in the same way that the breath changes.
Mm-hmm.
An internal object.
It's definitely much easier with the like the sudden breath. It's much more of a simulation of what happens when you're surprised or something.
Right. So the translation that I use is the first jhana is called bliss. Someone else told me the word ecstasy recently, like ecstatic. And I was like, oh, that does sort of fit a bit better, that there's this like real upshift in energy, and it's like exciting. And I wonder if if you follow a couple breaths and you do like a fast in breath for a couple breaths, you'll notice probably the buildup of this thing.
I can tell it's producing PT.
That's kind of exciting, there's a movement. For the maturing growing meditator, you want to do a bunch of that and then get used to it, right? That's a skill in itself that most people ignore because we're just breathing. But if you are not as distracted by different types of breath, then you're going to have a more stable mind. Do whatever it is you're trying to do in life.
Yeah, it's cool. I don't know if I could, like you said, tune into it with every breath. I would need to really construct it with this like simulation of being like you're about to go down a roller coaster or something.
Right. Yeah. So the like cause for continuous generation is like itself takes energy to be like, all right, let's be excited.
Yeah.
Take some sort of further down the path, that energy that it takes becomes more infinite. Early on, you're like, really, I need to like kick myself into motivation. But yeah, with practice essentially. And there's good reason as well not to get too excited, right? Because if we get too excited, we're going to be too disappointed, stuff like that. So we've learned not to get too excited, and you don't have that mechanism that slows you down from getting too excited. You get manic and bipolar and all sorts of psychotic things anyway. So it's good to have the like not too excited. But then obviously some people end up going there and finding out what happens when they get way too excited, or like feedback loop themselves into like way too excited.
That's an interesting point you make about like disappointment. So it's never happened to me that I've been like, oh yeah, right now I'm definitely in like jhana. But it has happened twice where it's like an explosion in your head of pity, And then the mind is like, wow, man, something's happening. And then it stops. And I was like, oh, I wonder why it stopped. But as you said, disappointed, I kind of think of myself as, yeah, sorry, there's two things here. I think of myself as somebody who actually fears disappointment a lot. Not necessarily so much myself, partly that, but like other people's. But the point being, I remember you saying you could have a certain block about, oh, it's not safe to feel a certain way. And just as you said it there, I was like, maybe that's something.
Hmm. So there's definitely a thing where the mind, well, first of all, things go like all tingly and explodey, and then you go like, whoa! And suddenly all of the like stability of the mind and like relaxed and concentrated is completely gone because you're like, wow, that was really exciting. And then you do it a couple times and there's less like, wow, that was really exciting, and more like, okay, that's cool. And then later it's like, I've done this before. Oh, and then later again, it's like, okay, we're going through the thing. But that's part of the joy of like going on the journey, right? At first it's like, what? And later you're like, okay, cool.
I could also tell as I'm trying this, the like excitement factor, and maybe actually if I try this a bit more, this will turn out to be wrong, but it feels like it's partially contingent on the in breath being pretty exciting, but then the out breath is not forced. It's just deflating. And then it goes up again and then it goes back down, as
Right.
opposed to like, a harder breathing like that.
Right. Like, how do I explain this? Do you want to check on the other genres and maybe it'll make more sense? So
Sure, I can't, I don't know if I'm going to get it, but I can give it a go.
second genre is on the second half of the in-breath, or you can find it through the second half of the in-breath, sort of lungs half full, filling up the rest of the way. And I suspect this is pretty normal for you. This is like, yeah, things are kind of warm and nice.
Yeah, the second half thing of like the upwards movement is over, but your lungs are still kind of inflating. It's still an in breath, but it's not as like, whoa,
Yes. So in this other guy's description, he used ecstasy for the first one, and then like happiness for the, and like sort of comfortable happiness for the second one. I use bliss and joy, but joy sort of implies more excitement than maybe is there.
Yeah, I feel like happy sounds right. It's kind of almost a glow, like, but it's a soft glow. It's not like the first thing that's kind of like a child. Like the first thing is like a child being excited, and the second thing is like an adult being happy.
Right. Yes. So that's like, and you can, if you stay on it for a couple of breaths, you'll get used to it and you'll like get a better sense of it. There's an opportunity to do a proper meditation sit, hanging out with it and like getting the hang of it.
What I found most confusing was, yeah, okay, now I have more context to explain this. The first one turning into the second one seems like a progression of sorts. But when I first was trying this following the video, it was only the fourth one that I was like, oh yeah, okay, breath is out and it's just kind of like nothing.
Mm.
But it wasn't as a progression from the third one. Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh, these first three, I don't feel I get it. But the last one, oh yeah, sure. So it felt like this was on its own, not as a result of 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm. Um, I think 3 is the link. So if I do like a hill, right? So we've gone up the hill, we're like rounding the top with the second one, and then we start the downhill on the third, and then we like trail off into the flat for the fourth.
Okay, actually, never mind. I just got it. The third one is like, yeah. The down the hill thing. It's like a relaxation and then it just stops. And the stop is the fourth one.
Yes, or the like. It's sort of like the third one sort of trails off until a long flat
Mhm.
stretch.
Okay,
So,
now I see how it's a continuous thing. That's
yeah,
cool.
right. And then you're in four, and then like suddenly like another breath happens.
Hmm.
Depending on how surprised you want to be.
Yeah, the third, actually, funny enough, is probably the most pleasant.
Hmm.
What is the word for the third one?
Right. So I call it contentment.
Hmm. Hmm.
It feels like a big sigh out, like got that quality of like downhill.
Hmm. It's it's the feeling of being in bed before you fall asleep, I would say.
Like
You
nice
know what I
warm
mean? Like
bed.
everything's fine, nothing to do, just you're
Mm.
just kind of relaxing. Yeah, that's cool.
Someone recently pointed out that it's got a link to sympathetic and parasympathetic, where
Mm.
you got one of your no, one of your what's your parasympathetic is controls like whether to get agitated, and your sympathetic controls whether to relax. And they're sort of different hormones and different systems. But the second half, so every time I get the labels wrong. Anyway, the second half is more like oh, this is how I self-soothe. This is how I calm myself down.
Yeah, yeah, it does feel that way.
Mm. So then, yeah. So these practices are more like choosing the way I want the breath to be, which is super
Mhm.
healthy and super good. Um, the original breath type practice is more like discovering how the breath is today, like trying to let
Mhm.
it be what it wants to be, and then like learning, like, oh, interesting. I'm in this pattern today, or you know, I find it hard to
Mhm.
relax or something, depending on what's on the mind.
Yeah, I definitely can't only do one. So even as I'm doing this like controlled thing, and even in the bit that I'm saying is so relaxing and nice, it's still kind of ragged a little bit as it comes out. And there's, at least at this moment, I'm thinking there's seemingly not much I can do about it. Not that it's a big deal, but it's true.
Ragged, as in like it's got spikes on it, like it's like, or what do you mean by ragged?
Yeah, let me just have a look.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like, I'm trying to think of, it's like when you're nervous or you're trying not to cry, maybe. It's almost like a mini holding of your breath and you're letting it out in like
Right.
that, in little, I don't know how to say it, but you know what I mean?
Hmm. Yep. Um, I would probably map that to my diaphragm, and there's like a quiver in my diaphragm. I
Hmm.
want to just go smoothly. It's got like a quiver in it. Um, and yeah, I would probably link that to like a sadness thing or some crying that needs to happen. I don't know how often you cry, but um, classic thing is uh, I wanted to cry and then I suppressed it, and now it's sort of still hanging around in the body.
Yeah, yeah. It's
So
like that. Exactly what it's like. Like you can even hear when you're about to cry. I feel like your breath, the sound of the breath being ragged is almost, it's not necessarily, but it's often a kind of, oh, here we go.
right. So there's an opportunity here for you to like release that. I don't know how comfortable you feel like leaning into crying, but to go with it and to be like, oh, some part of me needs to feel something softening or some letting go. If you like, you can do it later or you can do it now.
feel like this will take a while.
Right. So
I think I know what you're getting at though. It's just to kind of, well, actually, I'm going to say it, and you tell me if this sounds right. It's like, okay, I can't make this happen, but it's fine if it does. I'm just going to go with it, and I'm going to spend a while just like there, just like you can happen on this breath or not, and then eventually it it builds and then spills out. Does that sound right?
yes. But you can make it happen a little bit more. So if you like do the first jhana thing where you bring the breath in, what'll happen is you'll add energy to whatever's going on. And so chances are something like your rib cage or diaphragm will start to get more tense. Right? And there's an up build of that tension. And then what we're trying to do is the release. We're trying to do the release side of it. So if you can invite it to be a little bit more tense and then do the like softening release side of it, that's what we're trying to work through.
So it's trying to become more tense on the in breath to get more of a release on the out breath. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You may notice an emotional movement that comes with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It may be just that I'm like sitting on camera. I don't feel like I'm uncomfortable with it, but maybe I am. But yeah, I'll try it out later.
Sure. So this starts to move into like emotional territory, but anger. So if you were to cultivate anger, it like tenses up the body in some way. It like it's the emotion of like assert myself, like push back on the boundaries, be like, no, I don't like this, or get away from me, or some version of like I'm gonna punch you. So it like increases the tension in the body and increases the potential availability of my choice to act in the world in very strong like pushback sort of ways. So then I'd be bringing that up, and then sadness I usually categorize as a relinquishment. So I wanted a thing, and now I am letting go of the desire to want a thing. In that sense, sadness is super valuable for things that I can't get anymore. So my favorite example is the kid who drops the ice cream on the floor. It's like, I really wanted that ice cream, and now it's on the floor. And so now I sort of do the sadness thing to let go of the fact that I did want it and it's impossible now. And in that sense, there's a, if the thing that historically you wanted to get angry about is now past, there's a need to be angry and then be sad about it, to let the whole loop do its thing without like, you got angry and then you suppressed it, and then like it's just stayed suppressed. Don't worry, everyone did. We were all teenagers. We all like were like, oh, better not get angry now. Push it down. But to like let it come up and let it like go down again, sort of brings us capacity to move our energy through in the future. So if in the future I want to be passionate about something, I can let myself do that without. But currently, I like my anger went up and then I squashed it down, and so my new passion isn't available because it's all still like packed down there, hidden, way safer in the box.
I don't know. Maybe this is a silly question, but as you were describing it, like based on a particular event, like the dropping your ice cream or whatever. So there's that, and then there's the second description of like anger or sadness or whatever being somehow contained within the body. And then my question is, do these two need to be related? So for example, you are angry about dropping your ice cream or whatever, but then to release it, you think of something else to make yourself cry or make yourself sad. You know what I mean? So what the question is, can you make yourself cry about something different to let out crying about an event you're not thinking about? I don't know if if I've even asked that properly, but you
I
know what
would
I mean?
say in general, yes. Um, and if you've ever seen someone, you may or may not have ever seen someone cry and then start crying about the next thing. Like they
Yeah,
start crying about one thing and then they're like, and also, and you
yeah,
never
yeah.
like, I don't know if you're in a relationship, but you get the like, crying about this followed by and you never, and then and a couple more. Or like if you deal with little kids, the crying starts to like cascade to all of the things that need to be cried about.
So it's like secret option C, which is you can use a seemingly irrelevant thought to open the floodgates, and then the more will come. Yeah.
Right. So I think of there being a like emotional practice of. So I do this in like meditative style. I sit still and I like open the floodgates of three main emotions: fear, anger, and sadness, one at a time. Open the floodgates of each of them, and immediately the first thing that comes to mind is like that thing that happened a few days ago that I'm still annoyed about. And then, and then the next one that comes to mind is like the thing that happened 2 weeks ago. And then the next thing that comes to mind is, and just like opening the floodgates and letting a whole bunch of them like clear. Because what I really want in my everyday life is the ability to move in and out of emotion without being blocked. And so if I've opened the floodgates and cleared the first few things, then I have like free movement in and out of those emotions. Later, I'm allowed to get passionate. I'm allowed to get annoyed. I'm allowed to like, I've got like, sometimes I think of it like a rubber band of like capacity, right? So I like, this is my capacity to be angry, and I got annoyed, but I didn't tell the person about it, and like I suppressed it. And now like someone cut me off in traffic, and they're like a little bit more and a little bit more. And if I like relax all that tension, then I have new freedom to like stretch out next time. But if I'm like, stressed about school and someone cut me off in traffic and then like eventually I'll snap, or like my health will go down because I'm carrying too much stress in my body, or like something will happen to like give me space again. But I prefer to like release the floodgates a bit so that I can like have free movement. Definitely makes a big difference in working with people, talking to people, not getting annoyed at other people for doing dumb shit. Like, yeah, as a practice.
It's interesting because like as you're relating it, it's very like event focused or topic focused, but in line with the like what we're talking about, the breath. I often find, especially, yeah, no, actually probably exclusively in meditation, when you suddenly start to cry, it's not, it's sometimes like, oh, a thing came up and I'm sad about it and now I'm crying. But more often it's like, oh, I can see from my breath that I'm like bothered and I'm not necessarily thinking about anything. And now I'm crying. And why? I don't know. Like I'm not even that interested in why. It's just kind of happening. Like I would tie the markers most of the time more to the breath than like a thing that happened. You know what I mean?
I think of it as a two-way street. So the episodic memory can cause the emotions, or if I sit in meditation and I call up anger, that can bring up the episodic memory. And I just want to keep them clear. I don't really, in the end of the day, like when I meditated today, it's hard because I don't really get very distinct thoughts. I get like a mush of like tension, and then like tension wanting to move a little bit, and then like a little bit of heat, and then like there was like more like sensation based big movements. And at this point I have no story really about what it was, other than I'm like, oh, it feels like I'm annoyed at something, like mildly annoyed at something, and it feels like I'm trying to like push against something, and then like that all kind of disappears. But it seems like I move through something in my meditation, even though I don't really know the story anymore. But earlier on, I used to get heaps of like, this is what I'm, that conversation you had 10 years ago where you acted like an idiot. This one, you're going to think about this one during your meditation, and then like, I have less of those these days and more like,
Yeah,
general.
I've definitely had that sort of thing. Like, the thing they describe in the Finder's course for the love practice, where some dude is like diagnosed with a bad heart condition. He goes home, he's angry at his doctor, and then he like has I don't know if you call it an insight that like, oh, the doctor doesn't want to be. He's angry at the doctor for not doing enough in his mind, and then realizes, oh, hang on a second, the doctor doesn't want people to die either, and then feels sad for him. And I was like, I noticed, I know that like I've had that before, where you're not, as you say, you move from anger to sadness. Maybe actually, the example I'm thinking of, I didn't even know that would happen. I didn't intend it to happen. It was just like a normal distraction in meditation, and then this happened, and I was just like, wow, that's kind of interesting. So that would be kind of an episodic memory thing. And more lately, I find it kind of like seemingly contentless.
Yep. I find that well, there's a few things. One, I've moved to like earlier content along the way, like younger and younger in my life. And then at some point, my general theory is we cross the threshold of episodic memory. Like when we formed memories without language, when we form memories without like a good understanding or sense of time. And so naturally the content is going to be a bit all over the place. It's going to be a bit like there's a type thing, and then there's a surprise thing, and then there's a so we should expect, as we get clearer and clearer, as we get earlier into our stack, that it looks more and more like gibberish, and more like we just kind of have to go with it because it feels like right to go with, but without the story. Yeah, that's what it seems like.
And the breath is like a tool or a window for
Right,
for this, what you just described, the like tightness a little bit more, and then release all you can.
So if I let the breath do whatever it's doing naturally, it's gonna start picking up earlier and earlier patterning from my childhood or from when I was younger and younger. So, and then as I let it carry through, it can complete whatever it didn't get completed at the time, and got suppressed into my body or whatever. Particularly if we're going for the original breath, it's sort of like my experience in this moment plus whatever's coming up from the past for me, because we can sort of put it on hold, but also we should probably not, and should deal with it as it comes up.
Okay, that's interesting. The original breath thing, which, if I'm understanding right, is just the thing where you stop breathing and then wait and just see how you breathe. That doesn't have the ragged quality that it does when I'm doing the hard breathing thing for the trying to discern the jhana factors, or however you would put it. But the original breath doesn't seem to have maybe it's just too short, but it doesn't have it for one reason or another.
I suppose you can think of that as a new breath. So brand new, like when you go to like watch the next breath happen, it's like I take everything and I like hold it back here, and I'm like, okay, what's gonna happen next? And so all of my stuff from the past is like with me as the witness, and then I watch, and the breath is like you said, not ragged, very very comfortable. It's brand new, and I can let it be brand new. But obviously, at the same time, I do want to go back and sort out whatever bullshit I'm carrying that is stressing me out or whatever. So they're different practices.
I like the rubber band thing, because so like people can have two problems. I think the first problem you start with is you never want to talk about anything. Oh, I'm just going to sort it all myself. I'm going to do my special meditation and solve every problem I've ever had. And then for me, you graduate to a different problem where it's like, now I need to externalize absolutely everything. I need to talk about every single problem because if I don't do it, I'm suppressing it or something. So I'm like, right, you need to to hit the
I
middle
love
here
that.
somewhere, you know?
Well, then, so then there's a like, yeah, there's even more. There's layers to that as well. There's the like,
Okay.
there's even the like, oh, you're talking too much. You need to dial it back a bit. Then there's the like, oh, there's something left unsaid here that you should be saying. Dial it forward a bit, and then there's the like, um, how do I speak to what's true while balancing that with what needs to be said, while balancing that with anyway. It keeps going, I think. We live in this the mind that never stops. I don't know if you've noticed it yet, but something just keeps damn happening after another, one after another after another. It's just like there's just something else coming.
Yeah, it definitely feels like solving any particular problem you have at the moment is kind of a waste of time because it'll just be a new one. Like there's always this sense of, oh, I just need to, and then there's never an and then. Like there's always just one more thing. Or the best one is if you're experiencing some problem and you do nothing about it, and then it goes away with the introduction of a new problem. And it's kind of like, there's something funny going on here. This isn't quite what I thought it was.
Right. Yep. That's all part of it. On the other hand, I think I would rather solve my problem some of the time. Like I'm willing to like go there and put in effort and get them to move on. And it does seem like as I have solved more and more problems, things generally feel better and there's less and less of them. But it sure does feel like this stack is going to keep going.
Yeah, I would even say sometimes it feels like what you see as the problem. And now this is not like if you have like something bad going on in your life and it happens again and again and again, that's different. But if there's you have kind of what is, yeah, okay, I'll put it this way. Sometimes I'm worried about something, for example, and then nothing changes about it next week, but I'm not worried anymore. So I'm like, huh, it wasn't the it wasn't the content that was worrying. I was worried about something and then attaching that to some content. And then the idea is, okay, the content needs to change to dissolve the worry. And then maybe it does, but then it attaches to something else. Or maybe it doesn't. And then the worry might go away anyway. So that's what I mean by when I say like, oh, this doesn't work the way I think it does. It's always a thing of, oh, I just need to engage with this content. And then that's just, sure, that's it's as simple as that, isn't it? And it's like, well, I guess it doesn't seem to be.
Yep. Yep, it is definitely there's a thing there. There's skills like if you get more original breaths, right? Then chances are you'll pick up less new content. So your new content will just be nice and gentle and like nice breaths. And that's a skill. And then there's a skill of processing what's already here and having the jhanas or access to that process where you bring a thing up and then you like let it do its own thing to relax. That's a different skill for dealing with what's already come up. And technically we call that skillful means no, it's got a different name, but the cutting of the strings of the unskillful states and the cultivating of the skillful states. Ultimately, I don't want to have more bad time. I'm having a bad time. I'm worried. I want to just like cut that. They're like, nope, no need to worry. Content will be the same with or without the worry. Like, cut the worry and instead have maybe your optimism. Oh, I would like to do something about this because I'd much prefer have that than have the like negative version of the worry. Cut that one,
and
cultivate the positive one.
and you're saying that's the like the I guess I'll just say the jhana breath that's doing that.
Well, so if you have a, let's take a worry, right? So you have a worry and you put it in the first jhana, or you go through something like that ecstatic experience, right? And it gets like louder, right? Like this is very worrying. And then it's like super worrying. And then so you take it to the second jhana and it's like, oh yeah, this is the like, it's really worrying me. And then you take it to the third jhana and you're like, I'm gonna let go of this worry, like on the way down. And then the fourth, just like, this is like, this is the content, but the worry isn't as noisy.
So it's actually kind of facilitating the process that happens anyway,
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And the more you get
I
skilled
hadn't
at it,
spotted
the more it'll happen automatically as well.
it.
Like everything will become to equanimity very quickly.
Because yeah, that is the process where first is this
What was that?
like the excited sense of I need to do something about this, and then it reaches a height and then starts to drop off. Oh, maybe I don't have to do something about this. Maybe it's fine. You know what I mean? Yeah, I hadn't put that together. So to kind of to tell me if I have this like summary right.
Yeah.
The original breath is to get out of the way of the breath, so to speak. You breathe out and you just wait and see how you breathe. And maybe this isn't true for everyone, but for me, it seems to be a little bit shorter. If there's ragged breathing otherwise, that seems to go away. And you're saying that facilitates not picking up new bullshit, as opposed to the jhana breath, which, as I'm doing it, is kind of a sharp uptake and then a gentle releasing, the squeezing in almost as you go up and then relaxing even deeper as you go down. And that facilitates the process of letting go of already existing bullshit. Is that a good summary?
So ultimately, the jhanas start to get irrelevant because what happens is instead of my mind going like really worried and then like really calm, it just sort of like stays more stable. And like, it's like, oh, there's a thing here. I could be worried about that, but I don't really like, it's just, the mind is way more still. And you watch everyone else be like really worried. And then like, you're like, oh, okay, I guess you're really worried. But they're like, your main stability is like pretty solid.
Yeah, I guess for certain things, it seems that you go through this up and down process enough times that you just kind of don't anymore. It's like as you say,
I've seen this one before.
surprise wears off and you're like, oh yeah, this again. Like I know where this goes. Do you know what I mean? It's like I guess the example that's coming to mind is if you get angry and like when you're younger and you can't control it, you just turn into like an animal basically. And it takes a certain amount of doing that before you're like, maybe this is better just to not do, until eventually you can still feel angry, but it's like, like what's the big deal? I'm not gonna like, why bother? Why bother going with this?
Right. So there's definitely a healthy version of like, oh, I feel angry. I have lit the internal fire and I can let it move around and be alive and be annoyed as much as I need to be without having to dump it on the external world. And being the external world, I can just like, oh, yep, definitely what's angering me there. And then if I want to, I can use that fire to act in the external world, but I don't feel out of the control compelled to cause harm in the world.
Yeah, I guess the way I would put it is the thing that makes it spill out of you is there is some kind of lack of understanding that you could phrase as just totally going with this up and down thing without some kind of, I don't know, it's very hard to describe, some kind of like underlying, I know what this is, I know how this goes, I know that there's a skillful way to deal with it and not so skillful way to deal with it, and that there's still is this up and down quality, but it doesn't look like getting really annoyed, shouting, whatever, and then regretting. It's more just kind of like a build of intensity and then a dropping off of intensity internally.
We also do this thing where we like feed our stuff. So I start getting, as a 5-year-old, right? I start getting angry, and then like I'm like, anger calls for more fuel on the fire, right? And then I get angrier, and then I'm like, oh, it calls for more, and I just keep getting angry, and I'm like, I just keep doing that for a while. And two options: someone stops me, or I just kind of burn out.
Mm.
I just get tired. I run out of energy. I'm like, oh, now I'm tired. Um, but essentially, the like uh fire for the fire god, sort of like it just wants more of that. It doesn't like when it takes over on itself, it just anger just wants to be more angry. Like it just moves in that direction more, and that's okay. That's just how it is. But as an adult, we sort of realize, oh, as I'm feeding that, I realize I make more of a world I don't want. I'd rather a world that is happier than angrier, and so I can choose not to feed it as much, and get use it gently and get to where I need to go without feeding it.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed a kind of, especially if you're not even in a situation where, well, just be specific, which is I remember going to sleep once and kind of going over something in my head. I was angry about it. And at some stage just being like, what are you doing? Like you're doing this. Like you're thinking the next angry thought. Just like don't maybe. It's like, oh yeah. It's like you just never thought of it or something. You know what I mean?
Ah, great. That's much better now. What a relief. Yeah, very cool. And also, I think universal to minds. There's some universal patterns to like how minds do their thing and how we grow up, and we like learn that one and we learn that one, and then we like the whole territory. Like we sit here talking about the emotional territory as if it was like, on the one hand, in retrospect, it feels like how do I describe this? Like play equipment, right? But at the time, it was like bigger than we were, like dealing with anger. That is like, I was so mad. Like the anger was, it wasn't like playing on the jungle gym, sort of like stable. It was like, I'm being overwhelmed by a giant angry force that is bigger than I am. Something like that. But I remember,
I've definitely
yeah.
I've definitely found there's that paradoxical quality where on one level you're doing it and on another level you're not doing it. Like the feeding the fire thing,
Mm,
if you're looking at yourself saying, what are you doing? Like then it seems like it's just happening by itself.
right.
But the process of seeing that is happening, it's like you're saying to yourself, oh well, you're doing it. So just stop. And it's like the breath in that way. That I guess what's so special about the breath is like, are you doing it? Like sometimes you're not. Sometimes it feels like you're doing it. Sometimes it feels like you're not. It's
Mm.
got that kind of paradoxical quality to it.
Yeah, it seems like if you talk to enough people, you start to notice there's like a stable witness all the time. There's also
Mm.
the like, I'm gonna feed it one, but there's like, even though that you like, you can watch someone feeding it and you can be like, I can see your stable witness in there. Like, I wouldn't say that while they're angry, but I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna like watch you as you like feed it. Like, I'm not gonna buy in, I'm not gonna push back. I'm just gonna watch you feed it and then like, realize what you're doing because I can see your stable witness, and then like
Mm.
restabilize. Just like support people to come back to where they need to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Yeah, it is like people will point out that the breath as a meditation object is not special. Like you can do the sensations of whatever, and yet it does have a lot of special qualities to it. It mimics a lot of things in your mind. It responds a lot to what's going on in your mind. Like it's a good metaphor for whatever anger as we're talking about, or just a lot of stuff really.
So there's an interesting thing where the breath travels the boundary of outside the body to inside the body.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of weird because it represents also the way that we interact with the external world, and we have something like an internal experience. And I don't mean like the space inside the body, I mean the interior phenomena of what is it like to be me? What are my experiences? What does it feel like to be me? And that's like the breath is like coming on the inside and also like hanging out on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And so for most people, there's this separation, right? My inside spaces are different to the outside world. And that's pretty normal, and brains do that all the time. But actually, there's something like crossing that boundary like every breath, right? That's going in and going out, which is hopefully confusing. It's meant to be confusing. And hopefully can take us to a place where there's less of a boundary between my inside world and my outside world. And more of a like, these things meet at some interface.
Yeah, I think I'm not actually following what you're saying. So when sorry,
Yeah, no, great.
you said the breath kind of being the crossing the boundary between inside and outside. I thought you meant like, literally inside the body, in your throat, in your lungs, because that's obviously what it does. It goes in here and goes back out here. But no, you're saying the like internal sense of like, oh, this, oh, I can hear my thoughts, you can't hear my thoughts. I know what it's like to be me,
Right.
you don't. And now I'm like, okay, what's the breath there in that space? I'm not 100% sure what you're saying.
So when you described the body just then, you were like in the lungs, right? The breath goes into down the nose and into the lungs, right? So that's almost an exterior perspective on the body. I know I have lungs because the textbook said I have lungs. I haven't actually ripped open my chest to see them. I don't really want to, but there's like if I were to like look at, like do that, rip the lungs open and like stare at them, I could see them. I could see the various organs, right? But aside from doing that, I have this other version of my organs, which is how they feel on the inside of having them, right? And my lungs don't feel like lungs. They feel like when I go for the inside version of it, like what is it like on the inside of me? They don't feel like lungs. They feel like pressure and then like various other sensations. And so there's the category of external experience, and obviously I can look at you and I can measure your heartbeat. And then there's an internal experience where only you can know or have a sense of what it's like to have that heartbeat in this moment. And it's like a category of experience.
Yeah, and it's, you're having a sensation of the breath or whatever, and then you put the thought or the interpretation on it, like that is the breath. And
Right.
I guess that's what I say, that going back to earlier in the meeting, that's the problem that I began this with. I was exclusively with the thought or the interpretation of the breath as a thing that goes up and down. And then at some point you're like, oh, this is just, warmth is happening or something. And, it's around here. Sometimes you can point exactly, sometimes not quite, but the picture of the nose that you have is in your mind.
We also, as you watch the sensation, like we know that the nose like is shaped like this, but it doesn't. When I watch the sensations, they all sort of like happen in the center, and there's like this one, and then there's that one, and then there's that one. But they like where are the sensations happening is kind of an interesting exploration as well. Where they sort of happen in the center of all experience. But what happens is all of experience recenters around the center. Like, for example, if you hear a sound that is further away, that some part of my mind knows it's further away, but the sound is equally as central to my experience as if I like my visual field is like also center to my experience, as like my sensations is center to my experience. Which super weird. I don't know if that makes enough sense.
I feel like I'm grasping onto something that I already understand, so that I'm not understanding. It's like, yeah, I'm just grasping onto like, so I'm not trying to imagine the sound. A sound far away happens, but the sense that there is far away or any distance at all really is added by the mind. It's
Right.
the sound itself or whatever in some sense is like right here, just the way your visual field is
Well,
right here.
even
Is that what
from
you're
a
saying?
basic like physics perspective, it sounds like it's over there, but
Mm.
actually we're receiving it in our ears
Yeah,
right
exactly.
here. So I project that it's over there, but I hear it right here. Like I hear it very much in this near the head sort of area.
Yeah, like the way when you feel pain in your knee, you point to your knee. You don't point to your brain saying this is the brain interpreting the pain,
Right.
even though like certain point of view that would make perfect sense.
Right. And when you're feeling that pain, it very much feels like the center of everything. It hurts like hell.
Mm,
This is where everything is happening, is right where it hurts like hell, which is
mm,
obviously
mm,
over there on my knee in this moment. Yeah.
mm.
But so people often feel like they are, if you tell them to point to themselves, they'll point to like behind their eyes, sort of like I'm over.
Yeah, yeah.
But actually, if the pain is the central of my experience, suddenly I'm my knee more than I am behind my eyes.
Mm.
There's like an anchor that with a bit more meditation, people can like loosen that anchor and have a more spatial experience of being attached to the body.
Yeah, the closest I think I've gotten to recognizing that was, it was actually last night. I was listening to like some interview, and I tried this before, but for some reason it kind of clicked with me then. You like you're paying attention to the front half of your face and then the back of the head and then the front and then the back, and it's kind of like, are you in the middle between those 2 points? And I was for a second I was like, is my head in 2 dimensions? Like, do you know what I mean? Where does the idea that this is over here and this is back there in that kind of configuration even come from? It's just as easy to be like, oh, these are on the same plane.
Mm,
And that was the closest that I've ever gotten to be like, oh, I'm not in the middle of my head. That's like my default position. I'm in the middle of my head.
mm. I have a related kind of fun exercise if you want to try it sometime.
Hmm.
If you lie on your bed and you just like hold on to the mattress, like, oh no, what if I fall off? Right. And usually gravity's pulling us down, right? Like into the mattress. But are you sure? Like, if you just like hold on and like feel like, what is actually keeping me on here? You can have a very confusing, like, what if I fall upwards type experience. Which is it's interesting to play with.
I think I will try that. I kind of know what you mean. Like I could imagine having that, like, oh, what is going on right now, kind of thing. But the head thing is interesting because with the breath, because like when you're paying attention to your, I don't know, I'm like doubting myself now. I was about to say when you're paying attention to your breath, it feels like you're aiming at the breath from the center of your head. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, well, is it just a little bit like the sensations are becoming more prominent, and where does the center of the head thing even feature? I'm confusing myself now, but it, all I was getting at was it's the center of the head thing is another thing that's interesting in connection with the breath and what it is paying attention to the breath and how this feeling that I'm behind my face manifests as I'm paying attention to the breath.
Mm. Are you familiar with homunculus, the homunculus model? Right.
No.
So it's sort of this idea that like there's a little man inside my head with little
Mm.
controls. He's
That's what
like
it feels like.
controlling things, right? And then
Mm.
inside his head is another little man controlling him,
Right.
right, all the way back. And there's a reason why this model exists is that most people seem to walk around feeling like they have a homunculus sort of thing, like a thing, little
Mm.
controller. Um, and then with a bunch of meditation, we sort of get to the point that there isn't one, and there's only
Mhm.
the sensation that's happening wherever it's happening, on the knee or whatever. And that's like often pointed to in a non-duality sense. The duality being like I have an observer and a doer, and then a non-duality being like, oh, I've been creating this observer doer thingy all the time, and then I
Mhm.
can collapse into just the doing or just the happening. Lots of different kooky people with different language on how to describe it and point to it.
Mhm.
And lots of people claiming wonderful things around the phenomenology of such a thing. I try and not make big claims and just be like, oh, there's this cool thing.
Yeah, it's not something I recognize. Maybe sometimes when I'm noting and I'm like, noting a place, and then it's like, oh, am I down there?
Mm,
No, no, I'm up here looking down there. Like, but there's a split second of wait a second.
right. Um, Eventually you end up in the non-dual one, basically. I think with
Mm,
enough of different types of meditation, you end up there, and it's like, that's fine. There's some sort of discomfort created by the dual one, by having the little man in my head, that it's like
mm,
I'm like not quite in the world as much as I want to be. And then
mm.
as soon as I move to the non-dual one, it's like, oh, in a good way, I get to like interact with the world and like change the world. And then in a bad way, I'm so much more responsible for my life. What happens in my life, because I'm the me like version of like, oh, it's my life sort of thing, which takes some working through as well.
Yeah, I definitely get the like the homunculus thing is definitely like my default state,
Mm.
and there is that sense of separation there. And then there's the paradox of also does a homunculus have a homunculus? Like,
Yeah.
what's what's the Pixar movie about emotions and the emotions are in your head? And I'm like, well, hang on, the happy emotion isn't always happy. So does joy have anger in its head? Like, does that go down forever, turtles all the way, or you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense even in principle. So
Yeah.
it's kind of odd to walk around with it being your default point of view.
Yep. I think it's still a useful model along the way,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's I have a lot of models. I have a lot of models. It's good. But yeah, I'm aware of the time, and maybe now's a good time to wrap up.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for coming and hanging out and chatting about the breath and learning things. It's been good.
Yeah, cool. This was great. Thanks very much for hosting.
Yeah, sounds good. Here, let me